Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Can you hear me if I stand to the side? No? How about that? Oh boy. I need 3 hands then. Well, let me start off by taking a page from Steve Snyder's, what he did yesterday. Okay. All righty, I guess I'll have to hold this then. So thanks for the introduction. I am a polio survivor, so I'm passionate about wiping out polio. And in 1954, when I got polio, there were epidemics starting in the 1900s and peaking right about the time I got polio in 1954 with 35,000 cases. And with that many cases of polio, with it affecting mostly children under the age of 5, and people not really knowing how it was spread. They knew it was caused by a virus, but they didn't know how it was spread, so parents were panicked. They didn't let their kids go to the public swimming pool if it was open. A lot of them they just closed, didn't go to the movie theater. They didn't even let them out of the house sometimes because they were afraid their child would get polio. So during that time, the hospitals had these huge wards full of iron lungs to handle the people who got polio so bad that they were totally paralyzed and they couldn't even breathe on their own. Well, I was just a little toddler, 2 years old in 1954, and one morning my parents noticed that I couldn't stand up anymore. And they were just, oh my gosh, what's going on? We got to get him to the emergency room. So they rushed me off to the hospital, and their worst fears were realized. They found out that I had polio, and so I went from the emergency room to the isolation ward at the hospital with the other polio survivors or polio victims, and they were very serious about isolating us. So my parents couldn't see me for the next 2 weeks. I was in the isolation ward, and my parents were not allowed to come visit me. So there I was, just with a bunch of strangers. It was not a happy time, especially for my parents. Fortunately, since I was only 2, I don't remember a lot of it. But I did spend the next 3 months in the hospital going through daily physical therapy, learning how to walk again, getting fitted with a brace so that I could be able, at the end of that, to walk out of the hospital. And I despite the fact that I got polio and others didn't, I really feel lucky because I lived in an area that had good medical care, and my parents had good health insurance so that I could get the physical therapy. I've had multiple surgeries. And so even though my right leg is still paralyzed from the knee down and I wear a brace, those are things that are not available to children in other countries that get polio. And 6 months after I got polio, the Salk vaccine came out. That's the injectable vaccine, and so the country started getting as many kids as possible inoculated with that vaccine. And then we really took a huge step forward when the Sabin oral vaccine came out, because it's much easier to deliver. You don't have to have a professional. It's just 2 drops. And so we haven't had a single case of polio in this country since 1979. But as I mentioned earlier, that's not the case in some other parts of the world. And I know that this is a veteran group, so I'm speaking to the choir about wiping out polio. But I do want to share a few things that may be new to you. You've probably all heard of NIDs, that's National Immunization Days. And the reason for the day is because when they give the vaccine, they want to get as many kids as possible over a short period of time. In an area, they want to be there for just a few days so they can vaccinate as many kids as possible and not miss anyone. They find that if they try to spread it out and do it in clinics, they end up missing kids. So this way it's a lot more efficient. You make sure and get all of the kids. And I'm signed up to go to India in January to do my first NID. So I'm excited about that. Anybody else in the room done an NID? Okay, we've got a few, yes. Well, I'm looking forward to having that experience and helping out any way that I can. So it only takes 2 drops to give the children that vaccination. It costs less than $1 for that. However, there's a lot more that it takes to have the infrastructure to get the drops to those many kids. And so that's why we have partners. We've got the World Health Organization, UNICEF, our financial partner, the Gates Foundation. And look what we've accomplished since we started doing this in 1985. There were 350,000 cases a year worldwide in 125 different countries. And now we've gotten it down where there's only 2 countries that have polio cases, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Nigeria hasn't been certified polio-free yet, but they have not had a single case for over 3 years. So we expect in June, when the group meets for the certification, that Nigeria will be declared polio-free, and that since they're the only place in Africa where wild polio cases are occurring, that means the entire continent of Africa will be declared polio-free. So that's going to be a huge accomplishment, and that's why we're working so hard in Africa to keep that and not have another case come back. We also, that was announced and celebrated in August when they reached their three-year point. They'll get their official recognition in June. Well, we had another exciting announcement on World Polio Day just a week ago, and that is of the 3 types of polio that existed in 1985. We had already declared type 2 eradicated back in 2013, and now officially on October 24th, type 3 has been declared eradicated. So there's only 1 type left. That's the good news. The bad news is that we've had 96 cases of wild polio this year. We're really struggling, especially in Pakistan and Afghanistan. There's a number of reasons for that. We were making such tremendous progress. You can see from this chart that we only had 33 cases last year, and this year we're jumping way back up. One of the things that happened is that there was a disinformation campaign in Pakistan where people were spreading rumors that polio was making children sick. And the rumors were so powerful that hundreds of kids actually went to the hospital because they thought they had gotten sick from the vaccine. And when the doctors saw them, there was nothing wrong with them. It was just the rumors. But as a result of that, violence erupted. We had to temporarily cease the vaccination campaign in Pakistan and rethink this whole thing so that we can get this done right and get these vaccination campaigns back on track. But in the meantime, vaccination rates are low. The polio virus is in the environment. So we got more cases of polio. It's tragic, but we're on top of turning this around. So we have made great progress. I mentioned that we have wiped out 2 of the 3 polio virus types, and we've in Pakistan and Afghanistan, even though we've had more cases than previous years, those cases are in increasingly smaller and smaller geographic areas. So we do have polio surrounded. We're moving in on those areas where we know polio exists. And one of the things we've done is we've got a really fantastic surveillance campaign where we're sending polio workers out to take samples of the sewer systems, the latrines, the water, the lakes and rivers, to try to detect the polio virus before anybody gets infected. And in many cases, we've actually gone in with vaccination campaigns and actually vaccinated children in an area where polio virus existed and not had a single case of polio. So that's fantastic to think that we don't. It used to be we would wait until a child got paralyzed, and we didn't know about that for maybe a month or even two, and before it was finally confirmed, and that's when we would go in and vaccinate. And by that time, it's spread all over. Now we catch it before a single child gets infected and gets paralyzed. So great progress, but it's very fragile because of the violence in the areas, especially in Afghanistan and Pakistan where it still exists. We're not talking about the big cities where they're under control of the federal government and so you can make things happen. We're talking about remote areas on the borders that are under tribal control or the religious leader control. Not the kind of situations where it's necessarily safe to go in. So we really have to work with our Rotary partners there, people who speak the language, know the culture, and can help negotiate truces and get us in there again so that we can do the vaccination. For example, we also stopped vaccinating in Afghanistan for a while. It was because the Taliban said, no more vaccinations. They didn't really like the fact that we were going house to house and doing the vaccinations. So Rotary and its partners negotiated a compromise where we were able to resume the vaccinations in Afghanistan in clinics. So we still can't go to door, which we like to do to make sure that we haven't missed any child. But we are now able to resume the vaccinations in Afghanistan at clinics. So we've made some progress there. The campaigns that we do with the immunizations have a lot of things going on. Not only do we have volunteers who are out there delivering those 2 precious drops of the vaccine, but it takes a lot of infrastructure to organize and train the volunteers, to do the advertising. And in every country, the way they advertise is different. In the U.S. here, if we wanted to tell people about something, we would probably just put it on Facebook. But in areas like Pakistan and Afghanistan, we put up posters, we have vehicles with loudspeakers going up and down the streets announcing that the campaign's coming. So we have to adapt to every community, every village, everywhere we go in order to be successful. And that's where some of the money goes, in addition to the vaccine. And the numbers here, this is something that really fascinated me. I thought, okay, we're down to 2 countries. We don't have to do as much vaccination. We can focus on other things. No. We have to go and vaccinate in 60 different countries, and we have to reach 450 million children every year. So that's why it costs just as much now as it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because we have to keep vaccinating in all these countries until polio is declared eradicated. And that takes about 150,000 polio workers. They've got to be trained. We've got the ones that are in the streets going around and doing the campaigns. They need to have vests to wear so that they're recognized as part of Rotary, and people will let them come and do the vaccinations. And then the surveillance that I talked about, that's not cheap. You have to have the people who are wearing hazmat suits so that they don't get exposed to the diseases that are in these sewer systems. They collect these samples, and then they have to be sent back to a laboratory that's qualified to be able to detect these small bits of virus that are in the systems. So don't try to get everything out of this chart. It's very complicated, lots of information. I'm happy to share it if you want to study it. But something that interested me, if you look at the $50 million that we raise, and we get $100 million from the Gates Foundation, which we then spend on polio eradication, 2% goes to the vaccine. We need, and then we're funding laboratories, we're funding health workers, we're funding the publicity. I mean, somebody's got to pay the guy in the van who's driving around with a loudspeaker to let everybody know that the vaccinations are available. So it's a big project, and it takes an organization like Rotary to get it done. So what does it take financially? Well, it's $50 million that Rotary has pledged in order to get the $100 million match from the Gates Foundation. And that breaks down to $35 million in cash, $10 million from DDF, and $5 million from the World Fund match. And so those of you who've been in these grants meetings, you've learned about that some of the money that you donate to the annual fund then goes to the World Fund. Some comes back as DDF. Well, the World Fund is now matching every donation of DDF 1-to-1. So that means if your district donates some of your DDF to Polio Plus, it gets matched by the World Fund 1-to-1, and then that gets matched by the Gates Foundation 3-to-1. So you add all that up, it's one of the best investments you could ever make. It's a 6-to-1. Your district gives 20,000, that becomes 120,000. It's huge. And so, you know, any of you who are district leaders, I encourage you to be supportive of your district taking some of their DDF and donating it to polio. And let's take a look at how your district has done. I don't know. I have to read this, so I'm going to move closer. Hopefully I don't get to the end of my rope here. All right, so your district has last year, these are the last Rotary year's numbers, your district came up with nearly 100,000 in cash and that you're supposed to have a minimum of 1,500 per club as an average, and your district averaged 1,688 per club. So that, you know, that's really fantastic. You exceeded the goals that Rotary set out. You donated 20,000 DDF, which became 120,000 to Polio Plus. Now there is a downside, though, or maybe I should say, here, I'll look at it a different way. Here's an opportunity. You have 20% of your clubs that didn't give a single cent to polio. The number one goal, the number one project of Rotary International, eradicating polio, and you have 20% of your clubs that didn't donate. So those of you who know who those clubs are, do what you can to identify those clubs and, you know, talk to them, encourage them, help them understand what a huge accomplishment this is going to be. The reason it's called Countdown to History is, imagine the worldwide recognition that we're going to get in a few years when Rotary helps wipe out polio forever. No parent will ever have to worry about polio. No child will ever be paralyzed like I was. It's going to be huge. And you want to be part of that. You want every club in your district to be part of that. I've already gone over those numbers, so I'm going to just move on. And let's talk about what you can do. You can donate yourself. You can encourage your district leaders to designate some of your DDF to polio. You can raise awareness. Doesn't cost you a cent. I'm just talking about letting your friends, your neighbors, your relatives know how important it is to vaccinate all children according to CDC guidelines. If you look at what's happened in this country, I'm going to move on to this for a moment. What happened in this country in the last year? Measles outbreaks everywhere. It was just a few short years ago where measles was nearly eradicated in this country. There was hardly a single case. This last year, there's been 1,250 cases of measles. Why? Because parents stopped vaccinating their children. Our immunity went from protection from measles, so the cases disappear and it's almost declared wiped out, to over 1,000 cases this year because parents stopped vaccinating their children. So please talk about that, and to anybody you can, when you're running your Polio Plus fundraisers or you're doing your public outreach, don't forget to mention polio. Okay, I'm going to go back to something I missed here. All right, my current favorite fundraiser. There's hundreds of different ideas, but my current one, because I'm planning on participating with General Secretary John Huco. Anybody know who John Huco is? Oh, come on. He is the CEO of Rotary International. He's the top employee of Rotary International, who helps run things along with the president for that year of Rotary International. And he has been an avid cyclist for many years, and he and I are going to Tucson in November, later this month on the 23rd, to ride our bicycles and raise money for Polio Plus. And there's going to be about 10,000 riders there. Not all of them are doing it for Polio Plus. There are many other different charities that are involved. But I'm excited about it. I'm training hard, and I hope to be able to complete 54 miles on that day and raise money to help. I've raised $3,000 so far on my Ride to End Polio page. So what happens if we continue to not vaccinate children in this country, not only for measles, but polio and many other diseases? Well, we can return to those horrible days in the 50s when children start getting polio in this country. We can't let that happen, and so I encourage all of you to do what you can. I know many of you do. I see the Polio Plus pins. I saw the awards last night. Thank you very much for that. And now I want to put in a plug for the session that's coming up right after this. Up on the 4th floor, I would encourage any of you who haven't picked a place you're going yet to go to the Polio Plus program in the Corbin. It's upstairs on the 4th floor. You'll hear all kinds of noise up there. Go up there. We're going to have the District 5080 Polio Plus chair, Ed Cowitz. He's a retired veterinarian, and he's going to give us the technical and medical perspective so you can better understand what's going on with polio and why we went from 33 cases to 96 cases. And then we're going to have an interactive session where you can learn more about what other clubs are doing and what you can do to help raise funds and awareness for polio. So thank you.